Float! Float! Oliver!
Welcome to Beyond the Base Game. This is the mini-series where I talk about expansions to games because frankly, other reviewers just don't seem to want to. This is Heavy Rain for the major hotness from last year, Heat. Oh yes, this game was definitely on the popular side, wasn't it? It went onto my top 10 of the year, it certainly deserves it, but for a lot of people it was one of their favourites, or just generally it is the hotness. It's even in the top 100 of BGG if you give a monkeys about the ranking system there.
By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
So is this expansion worth it? It's certainly not a cheap expansion. I mean, you're paying a good £27 plus for this. That's almost a new game territory for a box that's not the biggest either. So is the content meaningful to justify that cost? Well, that's what we're here to find out.
Shut up and take my money!
So what does Heavy Rain add? Well, firstly, components for a new player. Yep, the original box had components to fit a 7th and 8th player. Although strangely, Days of Wonder have only included the 7th player in here. You essentially get orange. So orange gear stick, orange card, orange board, and enough heat cards, stress cards, and player cards to do an orange player. But only the 7th player, not the 8th. They've essentially done what Cosmic Encounter did with Fantasy Flight, where they added a new player every expansion. So if you were hoping that this was going to be your time to play a massive 8-player game, sorry, you're not going to be able to. You're going to have to wait for the next expansion, pay probably another 27-30 quid for that one, and get the 8th player components out of there. That's a little bit sketchy, Days of Wonder, pulling that one. I would have thought that you would have wanted to have released like a mini module with just the 7th and 8th player components in. Because honestly, if you are hyping to play this with 7 players, then great. You have this extra set in front of you. If you just wanted to play orange, then great. You now have orange available. Honestly, I couldn't have given a monkey's toss about having 7 or 8 players in my game of Heat, given that 5 and 6 players already takes this game to a level where it outstays its welcome pretty damn quickly. I much prefer this to play this either solo with the AI bots, or to play this with up to 4 players and use the AI bots to fill in the gaps, because the AI system is so easy to operate. At least that way you have 6 cars on the track, but you don't have to wait for 6 players to go through their turns before you get to do another round. Believe me, 6-player games of this with 3 laps on some of those tracks, oh man, it takes a while. You know, it certainly takes it way beyond the realms of something like Downforce, which is done in probably half the time. But that's for my review to explain a bit more about. That being said, if you want 7th players, then great, you have it, it's there. So why get in the way of it? So the maps. This is why I wanted the expansion, because I like having new maps. Same with Downforce. Downforce added, what, like 4 new maps, I think, by now? Maybe even more. And that one, I always loved doing it. The 4 maps that are in the base game are fine, although honestly, who plays USA? USA is such a boring map. It's literally pretty much just an oval, and with barely any bends and just one long stretch. It's not exactly that impactful.
I beg to differ, sir.
Playing something like Great Britain or Italy out of here is a little bit more interesting. So I wanted these to introduce, like, you know, some cool stuff. You know, let me have something a little bit funky and new. Well, let's take a look at the first one to hit the dough. This one is, whoop, here we go. Don't worry, I'll try and get some pictures for you as well. But this one is Mexico, and I certainly give it prop points for having, like, such bright yellow. I mean, this one really pops on the table. Now, this one is, I believe, if I look at the stats, where we go. Yes, this is a 3-lap race with 6 corners and 60 spaces on it. It tells you on here, basically. And you only get 2 stress cards here instead of 3. Normally you get 3, but here you get 2, although you end up with 6 heat cards. And for the most part, the track is fairly straightforward. I mean, it's not that dissimilar from something like USA, really. I mean, you've got a fairly long stretch. You've got a couple of corners here, you know, at speed 7, which is, like, you know, pretty easy. You've got a ridiculous one over here, you know, where 2 corners are at speed 2, and then you got a couple more corners at relatively high speeds elsewhere. So what's its unique selling point? Well, this corner and this corner are chicanes. The chicanes are essentially 2 corners straight after the other. They're separated by like a blue and white border so you can see what they are. But basically, yeah, it's 2 corners stuck right next to each other, and that's kind of it, really. That's all the unique thing is to this map. It's just a slightly funky corner. You know, the rulebook is not particularly big, and honestly, the rulebook explains, like, what, a page and a half tops to explain the new content in here. But chicanes are basically just 2 consecutive corner lines with a couple of special rules when you're using those advanced components, like what the weather upgrades and the different things that could affect each sector of a track. There's a couple of special rules for that there, but that's kind of it. It's just basically 2 corners back to back.
Whippy!
I mean, is that really a massive deal? You play something like Downforce, you ended up with the figure of 8s that caused like collisions and everybody to get stuck. You had the Safari one where animals got in the way of your tracks. You had the one with the ramps. You know, there was a lot of cool stuff in those new maps. This one is, you know, it's a fun map, and I kind of do approve of the fact that, you know, it looks nice on the table, but yeah, it doesn't necessarily have much difference here between it and the rest of the maps, but at least that means it's a relatively straightforward one. So let's have a look at Japan. Whoop, let's turn it around so I can do it. I don't want to break the board. Japan, this one looks a little bit more cool. You essentially have a bridge that goes over the track, which is, you know, fairly, you know, it doesn't do anything special, but it just looks cool to have a bridge on the track. It's one of the few tracks to only have 2 laps, and I kind of approve of that, actually. 5 corners, 60 spaces, but only 2 laps. Because honestly, I think Heat is better played with just 2 laps. When you play it with 3, it just outstays its welcome a little bit too much, particularly with 5 and 6 players. I tend to house rule that if I'm playing Heat and anything with 5 and 6 players, I shorten it to 2 laps. Well, thankfully the board's done that for me. So what's special about this one? Well, I did say it was called Heavy Rain for a reason, and Japan is kind of the poster child for the heavy rain, because there are 3 sections of the track that are essentially flooded. It's just water has gushed onto the track and it's made it soaking wet. Other than that, it mainly just has a couple of like fairly tight corners. But what the flooded spaces do, and literally it's just that is all it is. That top bit there, that's all the rules you're getting for this. It simply just means that when you start your round on a flooded space, it costs extra heat to shift down. And that's it. Yeah, that's literally it. It doesn't actually mean a difference if you're shifting up. It's just if you shift down. Although, the good thing with this is that the flooded spaces are before the corners. If it had been after the corners, it would have been like kind of pointless really. But the idea is that the lead up to the corners is where you are likely to shift down a gear. So by going to the corner and braking, it's costing you more heat. You know, 1 heat if you go down a step, at least an extra 2 heat if you go down 2 steps. So what do? Do you just go straight for the corner at high speed on flooded tracks, or do you slow down and take the heat anyway? It's led to quite a few reckless plays from players, I've got to admit. Yes, it gives you 1 extra heat at the start, but yeah, spin-outs can be a little bit more commonplace on this track. And so, as much as I would have liked maybe a little bit extra on the track, this is still probably my favourite of the 2 tracks in this set. And it's definitely, I think, the one that I tend to want to bring out more, because I just think the rain does add a nice little twist to the game, whereas the chicanes on the Mexico map don't really make a great deal of difference. So 2 maps and player components. Anything left? Well, a couple of things. You've essentially got some more sponsor cards. Great. It works with one of the new mechanics in here, although to be fair, I don't actually find myself using the sponsorship stuff because that's mostly to do with like the championship mode, and I just like to play a map by itself. But you do have a new set of upgrade cards if you play with that advanced module. Sadly, it's not one that I get to play very often because I don't like to use this module when teaching the game to brand new players. And sadly, I end up mostly playing this with brand new players, which means it's very hard for me to use this module. But essentially, it just adds some variants of air intake with a new symbol of super cool, which pretty much is an advanced form of cooling. You know, it lets you take the heat out of your discard pile rather than out of your hand, which is awesome. That is an awesome ability. I mean, how many times do you get to cool down heat and it's never in your hand? The fact that you can just take it out of your discard pile is pretty insane. These, you literally just shuffle into the deck and have fun with them. So, nice, easy, include. The weird thing that I did notice in this expansion though, and it's written at the bottom of this rulebook, and I rolled my eyes when I read this. I literally had to kind of like, you know, pop them out of my sockets, give them a little clean, and make certain I'd read it right. Because this is ridiculous. It's a very minor thing, and it's not even gonna really, like, nobody is really gonna care about it. But wow, this is weird, right? Aggressive Legends. You remember the Legends module from the original set? Legends can be more aggressive on some portions of the tracks, giving the opportunity to clear 2 corners in the same round. Okay, so it makes the AI a little bit more reckless. Great. If a legend starts its turn on a space with a chevron above the diamond on the track, which is present on some of these, it can cross one extra corner line, because normally they only do one corner at a time. Okay, great. They had to do this in order to make it work with the chicane track, I suspect, right? Here's the weird bit. Note, this rule can be used on the Great Britain track in the base game as well. Simply draw a chevron on the 0 space in front of the corners that show a speed limit of 6, 5, and 4.
Right.
Yeah, you heard me right. Draw a chevron.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Days of Wonder want you to physically draw on your board with felt tip, biro, whatever, to add an extra tweak to a map, a single map. Were you so tight in your production that you couldn't have put a sticker? Or, well, what would you need? 3 stickers? 4 stickers or so? Tops? Could you have not just included a tiny... I mean, you wouldn't even needed any surface area bigger than this card. You literally just had to print 3 or 4 stickers and that would have been fine.
Spared no expense.
Who is... Has anybody out there taken a biro or a Sharpie or whatever to their board and drawn on it willingly? Because if you have a lot more balls than most people out there. Because, wow, I am not the sort that likes to draw on my games, okay? Roll and writes are a different species, and legacy games are meant to be drawn on. This is not a legacy game. What the hell, Days of Wonder? That is insane.
I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
But that being said, it's such a tiny thing. I mean, it's not something I care about. And honestly, if I'm going to use aggressive legends, I'll just play on one of the 2 new tracks. It doesn't affect the rating at all. I just read it and had to roll my eyes a little bit. So overall, Heat Heavy Rain is fine. It's 2 maps, 7-player component, which I didn't really care about, and a new item and sponsor. Great, you know, there's nothing particularly major. But this is not the cheapest expansion in the world. This is £27 plus, I see it online. That's quite expensive. I mean, you don't get that much in here. And one of the maps isn't even that impactful. The Japan map is easily the best of the 2, but I really didn't find the Mexico map to be that much more interesting than just, say, the typical USA map. So really, I'm unlikely to play the Mexico map often. I'm mainly doing this for the Japan map, so that's 1 map. I never cared too much about 7-player, so whoopee, you can now pick from orange. But at least I can have 7 AI cards, I guess. 6 AI cards on myself, so that's probably a cool thing. But yeah, for £27, I was kind of hoping that this would give me a bit more for its price value. It's not cheap. It's almost new game price territory for just what I've got here in front of me. I mean, this is literally it. Book, 7th player, cards, and the map. That's it, nothing else. And in order to put everything in the box, you're going to have to do some squeezing and some mixing with some of the cards if you have sleeved your cards, because I don't think the box is tailored to hold multiple expansions worth of cards that are sleeved particularly easy. So, you know, they'll fit this one, but if another one comes out, you might want to be careful. So overall, I give Heat a 7 out of 10. It's a good expansion if you want more maps and the 7-player component. I would have just liked a bit more bang for its buck for when it's asking a much higher price than something like, say, Architect's Medals, which is like 15 quid, and you get a small inclusion. But I guess new boards do rack up a cost, so I can't be too harsh towards it. But 7 out of 10 is a good expansion. If you love Heat, it's more content, but it doesn't really change up the game that much. It's just more stuff. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. Don't forget to thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the site. Don't forget to check out the rest of my content. The top 100 is now finished. I have reviewed 7 Wonders Medals, 7 Wonders Architects Medals, sorry, the expansion to the newest Gateway game. And also I have done a recent podcast where I reviewed the Fox experiment, so by all means check out that one. And of course, leave your comments down below. Do you love Heat? Do you think it outstays its welcome? Are you interested in playing this with 7 players? You know, did you find that it was just going on too long, or did you find it actually didn't really add that much and you will do it every time? Let me know your thoughts. Until next time, remember, regardless of whether you're that fussed about the colour orange or not, it's still only a game, so take care and bye for now.